This episode is brought to you by Audible, the place to go for audiobooks. Spoil your eardrums and get all your favorite books read out loud to you. Go to barenakedbravery.com/audible to sign up, try it out, and get 2 free audiobooks right away. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. This is the place where we expose the threads of heroism that stitch together the stories we admire most. As a musician, singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and business owner, I encounter some really fascinating stories. Every episode you'll hear features a revealing conversation with someone who courageously pours themselves out into the world. We'll talk about fears befriended, the terrors battled, and the courage created along our stories of bravery, quiet heroism, and all-out gutsiness. We open the Pandora's box of the dream-crushing constraints we all face during significant moments of bravery. These moments of bare naked bravery are rarely censored in real life, so if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. The questions I ask today aren't scripted because I'm just curious. What is bravery? My hope for us all is that by listening to others search for and find their bravery, we will find our own. For that is what we need most, to know that we are not alone. The best way you can support the show is to share it with a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle's Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Bottom line, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. In today's episode, we talk with international best-selling author Wendy Vandepoel, who is a pioneering leader in the field of pet loss grief support. She's the founder of the Center for Pet Loss Grief, where she bravely provides wisdom, joy, and compassion for grief relief in her practice. Wendy is a licensed massage therapist for humans, horses, and hounds, and she's a certified end-of-life and grief coach and a pet funeral celebrant. She's got a master's degree of science in wolf ecology. So Wendy has run with the wolves in Minnesota, coyotes in Massachusetts, and foxes in her backyard. I know Wendy through a couple author groups I'm in, and this is a little known fact about Wendy, at least to the Google public, but she is a phenomenal ballroom dancer. I have seen photos of her form and it is impeccable. Wendy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Emily. I'm so happy to be here. It's really exciting.
What? Pet loss and ballroom dancing.
Yeah.
How do those things go together?
They go together very, very well because in the field of working with people during the end of life, pet hospice, or pet grief after they lose their pets, I have to be end of life safe, so to speak. I have to take care of myself so that I can be the best I can for my people and their animals. So ballroom dancing is actually my relief. It's a way for me, it's better than therapy, one-on-one therapy. I go every week. I spend an hour and a half with my teacher and I work really hard and I practice every day. So it's a mental, physical, spiritual practice for me.
Yeah.
And so they work really well together.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, they work really well.
I can imagine. That's a lot, very similar to when I'm working on business marketing, consulting stuff, and then I jump into my music party writer brain mode. It's so refreshing to jump back and forth into the two very different but very related pools.
Very related, right. Because we, like Emily, as you just said, we need an outlet too. We're taking care of people, we're working with people, and to do the best we can for them by taking care of ourselves, by doing something that's passionate in our hearts and that make us happy and just it's our food. It's our spiritual food.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very much akin to the put your own oxygen mask on first.
Exactly.
Yes.
I never thought of it that way, but yeah.
For sure. For sure. I would love to talk with you a little bit about pet loss grief, of course, since that's your expertise. But I also know that you are a very big advocate for animal ecology.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually researched you before we got on this call. And I did some research on wolf ecology, and it's so fascinating,
Yes.
especially what's been happening in Yellowstone
Yes.
over the last 20 years.
Yes.
How did you pick wolf ecology and a master's in it?
Yeah, right, huh?
Yeah.
And I've run with the wolves, you know? I've actually run with wild wolves in the bush.
What is that like?
That's like incredible. It's incredible. I mean, the stories that I can tell you are just like mind-blowing. It's 60 below, walking, snowshoeing on a remote lake in Minnesota by myself. There's no tracks on the lake whatsoever. I'm breaking trail to find wolf tracks. And all of a sudden I stop because I hear something. And the first sound I heard that I thought I heard, it was actually my heartbeat, because it was so still and it was so cold. My heart was just pounding. So I stopped and I listened and, took a couple breaths. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to intuitively listen to this, because this might get a little dangerous. And it wasn't a very long period of time. This was in a moment of probably like 2 minutes.
Were you like a wolf ecologist by this point?
Oh yeah. Okay. I was
So
working.
you knew what you were doing.
I knew what I was doing. Yeah, okay. I knew what I was doing. So I turned around, and again, this took probably about 2 minutes. And I was far away from land. I was pretty much in the middle of the lake. I turned around and I took about 20 steps, and I looked down, and there were fresh wolf tracks that had stopped when I stopped and then turned around. And I wasn't afraid, but it was just one of the most spiritual, emotional times of being in the woods, being in the bush, and having very close encounters with wolves. And, some of the projects that I was involved with, we put radio collars on them, which I hated. And when we were measuring them and looking at their teeth and all that, I oftentimes could feel the wolf pack watching us. And yeah. And if, the other people that were working with me, they were kind of noisy and didn't really care. I cared. And so it was, when I got to work alone, it was wonderful, because then I would able to just sit there and listen and talk to the animals, basically, because that's what I do. I talk to the animals.
Yeah.
And they would give me physical sounds, so I could hear little cracks in the twigs or the leaves. And that's when I got the message, when I was out there by myself and I was weighing a wolf and doing all the things I needed to do, that I got the message that your job in this world is to help, to be a translator for us wild animals, because people aren't doing it. People aren't getting it, but that's what you've been put on the earth to do. Well, I thought I was going nuts. I thought I'd been
like, was this like an audible thing that you heard?
It was
like, what is it? Just like
I'm an animal communicator and an animal medium.
Yeah.
So it was my guide. At that time, I wasn't practicing, but I was getting a lot of messages, and I was very skeptic at that time.
Yeah.
So I thought I was nuts. I thought I had too much sun. Thought I had too many bug bites. I was like, this is nuts. They're really going to take me away. But I knew better. And it was basically pictures. Animals communicate virtually through pictures. It's like a movie camera. So I was getting all these pictures, and I was getting sensations and feelings. And then my guide started to talk to me.
Wow.
And I know I'm not crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's when it started again, because I've always talked to animals ever since I've been a kid. And I thought everybody did it. But then as a teenager, you forget. No, forget that. It's not cool. It was more cool to go shopping and hang out at the mall. So it wasn't until I was back in college and going towards my master's that this started to happen really strongly. And I started to pay attention to it.
It's an amazing thing when you can like sink into the calling.
Yeah.
Like any calling.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because here's the thing. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I wasn't listening to my calling. I did some really stupid and harmful things to myself because I didn't listen. And this is putting animal communication aside. This is just my own listening to my own gut, listening to my own intuition, listening to my guides, who I now know very well and keep my ass in gear and in line. They don't let me get away with anything anymore because I didn't listen and I wasn't listening and I was doing stupid things, harmful things to myself. And it was that one day with my a former dance teacher. It was like, I don't know, 10 years ago? No, I don't remember. I'm not good at that stuff. But that it became really nasty. And
how so?
Oh my God, it was the experience. It's not something that I'm proud to reveal about myself, but as a woman, I think it's important to share it, because I think we all have that potential as women, because we are so giving. We love the world.
Yep.
We love everybody, and we want everybody to love us back. Mm-hmm. That doesn't always work, unfortunately. Right? So I acquired, I guess you could say, I met this teacher at that time, and I was enamored. He was quite accomplished, according to him, but then as I learned, he wasn't really that accomplished. And, and I had a gut feeling, take lessons from him, dance with him, but don't get involved. Don't go out to dinner. Don't go out to lunch. Don't hang out, just dance. Keep it business. I got that the moment I met him. Did I listen? No. So as time progressed, it was probably 6 months, his personality was coming out. I was getting numb and freaked out and afraid and controlled. And when I tell this story to my friends, they go, "You're like the most in control person I know. I can't believe you would allow somebody to control you." And you hear those stories of women, especially middle-aged women, meeting younger men, right? And before you know it, they're in their will and they're taking all their money and blah, 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 or doing worse things than that. Well, that was the path I was on. And he was saying, "I think you really should divorce my husband and I have a beautiful marriage. And we've been married for over 30 years. And he was starting to convince me my husband was not good for me. It was so messed up. It was so messed up. And I started to believe him. Luckily, because I wasn't trusting my intuition. And here's the story on this. And this is what I thank this person. I don't have any contact with him. I do not want to have any contact with him. But energetically, I thank him for kicking me in the ass so that I can choose, one, happiness. I can choose that I'm not going to listen to anybody before I listen to myself. Because you know why? I'm going to get in deep doo-doo with my spirit team. And my spirit team, you don't want to piss them off. Because when you piss them off, they give me situations like that. And the day that it happened was we were in practice, getting ready. We had a competition in 5 days. And he had been yelling at me and screaming at me and telling me, I stink as a dancer and, I'll never do anything. And I was doing a cha-cha and I missed the timing because I was freaked out. I was like
Right.
I felt hands going around my neck. And he goes, I can't say the word he said, but you.
Oh, you can actually say the word if you want to. Yes.
Oh, I can on this
Oh,
podcast?
totally. Oh, totally.
He says, you fucking stink and I hate you. You suck. I'm firing you as my student. So I was like, holy crow. And it took a long time of healing.
So he kicked you out before you kicked him out?
Yeah. Because I was controlled. He was pathological. I learned that he
Yeah.
very pathological. I feel as weird as this sounds, I have compassion for the pain and the turmoil that he has to live with. Or I don't know. I have no contact with him, so I don't know. Maybe he's healed. Maybe he hasn't. So, but for him to need to do that to somebody.
Yeah.
I have compassion. That's sad. That's really sad. Maybe I'm really glad that happened to me because I still might be doing some of those stupid things.
Can you imagine what you would have been doing or what you would have been if you kept going?
Oh, I know.
What would that have looked like?
I know. I would have divorced my husband. He probably would be in my will. I probably would not be dancing. I'd probably be not very happy. However, though, there probably would have been a breaking point because I'm a very strong person.
Yeah.
And something would have happened.
What contributed to the breaking point that actually happened?
Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea why he did that. I mean, it could have been somehow, like I wasn't aware of it. I mean, that's a really good question. And I'm going to say intuitively that he picked up and he knew he wasn't going to be able to control me. And he didn't know his way out. And this is the way he did it.
Yeah.
Because I did hear after that it wasn't uncommon behavior. Other people had experienced it. Quite a few people have experienced it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and that leads us back into pet loss and grief. Like,
yes.
What does it mean to say goodbye? And
right.
So sometimes when people say goodbye to us, they do it abruptly.
Right.
We're left there hanging with all of these strings and cords. And,
oh my God, yes.
And stuff in our hands. And we're like, what do we do?
Right.
What do I do with all of this now?
Right.
When you have no control over the timing of your goodbye, what can you control? Or what can you contribute to the goodbye?
That's an excellent question. The thing that you can control is how you create your grief journey. I work with my clients and even myself with my own grief when losing Marley is...
And Marley was your dog?
Yeah, Marley was my dog that inspired me to get my ass in gear. Okay, she basically Marley sat me down. She gave me the look and sat me down. And she said, okay, get it in gear, girl. And she still talks to me. And it still reminds me. The thing that you have control of is your own beliefs, your own heart, your own intuition, your own choices, your own way to do grief. There's many ways to do grief. And we're all individual. We all have our own personalities. We all have our own experiences with our pets that nobody, even in your own household, everybody has their own experience with that pet. Is to embrace that. I mean, I know that sounds a little corny to embrace it, but it's true. Is to own it, embrace it, and not let anybody judge. Because that's what gives me, that's what gives my clients, that gives what my friends, that gives the people that I talk to, the guts. Grief is tough. It takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of bravery, raw bravery, to take it by the hand and not let it win. Yeah. But it's also important to let grief have its say.
Yeah, it's almost like you need to give it air so that it can move on.
Yes. Yeah. You need to give grief a voice. Grief needs a voice. But it doesn't need to overtake.
Yeah, it can't overtake.
Yeah.
With this abusive dance instructor, after he fired you as a student.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous.
It sounds like Well, I mean, I can understand the need for a teacher to move on from.
Yes, yes.
But like, it's almost like it sounds kind of like somebody was going like, oh, you're going to break up with me? No, I'll break up with you first.
I know. It was a little weird.
So post that breakup, like post saying goodbye to him or him saying goodbye to you.
Yeah, no, I had to say goodbye too.
What was your goodbye like?
I had a lot of grief. It was pretty devastating. I was very devastated because I was left very raw, and did not have a sense of myself. So I didn't know what to grab onto. My husband was amazing. And even at that time, I could not trust my intuition. I still couldn't grab onto it. So, I went to a therapist and that wasn't working. And I said, you know what? I knew in my heart, I knew in my soul that this was deeper. This was a big lesson. I didn't know what it was yet because I was still so much in the grief and I couldn't get out of bed. I suffered a lot of it was getting to be abnormal grief. Wasn't eating. I isolated myself. I stayed in bed and, I had a few friends that I reached out to. But anyhow, I decided I was going to go to a psychic. And I've been to a few psychics in my life. And, I believe in that stuff. My mother's psychic, my grandmother's psychic, and I'm psychic. And I've had psychic things, interludes since I've been a kid. And I said, you know what? No therapist is going to figure this out. I got to get to the spiritual. That changed my life. That started me. It was a process. The grief lasted probably, the hard grief, the nasty grief, the raw grief lasted probably 6 months. The PTSD lasted 3 years. So I was still experiencing grief.
How did the PTSD manifest?
Competitions. I was petrified to go to competitions. So I either had a girlfriend with me all the time, my husband with me all the time. I would always made sure I was not alone. Luckily, until I knew if he was there or not. Luckily, he moved out of the area, so we weren't going to the same competition. So I was able to get over that.
What was that like to be forced to live and operate in the midst of your PTSD triggers?
Oh my God. Oh my God. It was a growth period. It was fast growth. It was expedited growth. And every time I knew I was going to a competition and I wasn't sure, I would go through the grief of it again. And then I would be hyper aware. And it was more than just pre-competition jitters. It would be fear, intense fears of walking into the hotel, walking onto the ballroom. And I would, be surveying the ballroom constantly.
Which is not what you need to be doing.
Not what you need to be doing when you're competing.
No.
So here's the thing. Here's the really cool thing. I think this happened like 6 years ago. Again, I'm not good with timing. But I walk in. I went to one of the largest competitions this past fall, and I walk into the ballroom. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. I walk into the ballroom. No. I was walking in the hallway with my husband, and I see him in a distance.
This abusive dance instructor.
Yes. And I said, okay, guides, he's here. And they said, okay, you know what to do. My stomach did not go into my throat. My heart didn't drop. I did not get prickly. I did not get freaked out. I did not get any symptoms whatsoever. He walks by and he's all happy to see me. And I just nod. My husband keeps walking and we just keep walking. I felt amazing because I knew at that point that I made that energetic, that intuitive choice. I changed the karma. I changed the contract, the soul contract that I had, which was old with this person. I changed it, and that it was no longer needed in my life. I listened. My gut said, do not talk to him. You see him Okay, yeah, it would be cool, right? To give a hug and forgive. Well, you do forgive. You forgive yourself first. And you don't need.
I think a lot of people that I know of and that I've experienced in previous versions of my life, this life, I should say.
Depends on
I don't know how many lives we have. I don't really know. So
right.
But earlier in my life, so when I was younger, my definition of forgiveness and the way that I thought forgiveness looked like is very different than the way that I know it to look like now.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And like in the beginning of our conversation today, I was saying like how as women, we want to give our blood, sweat, and tears and our soul and everything to everybody without thinking of ourselves first. And we've got to forgive ourselves for that. Yeah. We really do. It's like selfish is not a bad word. Selfish is important.
No, it's crucial.
It's crucial, right? It's not a narcissistic word, it keeps us safe. It keeps us whole. It keeps us powerful. It keeps us able to make those split decisions like I did at that competition. I changed the contract I had with this person.
And you kept walking down the hallway.
Yeah.
And then what?
It was done. I was done. I was just like, something clicked. I felt a shift. It was like my spine, my chakras, my spine, however, I just felt this and I just clicked. And I danced my ass off on the floor. He was in the ballroom the whole time. I didn't care. I knew he was there. He walked by me about 4, 5, 6 times. I was like, oh, really? Come on. You don't need to walk by me. And I was just...
So your awareness was still there.
It was still there, but it was different. It was different. I had to work to keep my safety, and my guides were working very hard. But it was easy. It was very easy. And I was very empowered by the experience. It changed my life.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds exhilarating.
Yeah. So now when I go on the dance floor, I was just in Manhattan, and I have a fabulous teacher. We've been together 5 years, and we have a blast. We're really good partners. I walked on that floor, and I hadn't competed since that larger competition in the Midwest. I walked on that dance floor like I owned it. And I go, wow, what was that shift? And it wasn't until I'm sitting on the Amtrak on the way home, and I'm going, because I changed the energy. Nobody else was living inside me. It was purely me, purely the music, purely my dance spirit team, It was purely my heel, my Wendy as an authentic person on the dance floor without any crap, without any Klingons,
Exactly.
Yeah. That is how intuition, listening, making, and it doesn't, you don't have to become a practicing psychic or be a practicing animal communicator or an animal medium or anything like that. As women, as anybody, when we listen to our intuition, that's what helps us move through difficult times like grief. It helps us choose things in our lives because we're being totally honest with ourselves.
Before we get back to today's bravery, I want to make sure you know about one of my favorite ways to instill bravery and receive mentorship in my weekly routine. If you're listening to this show right now, then I'm fairly certain you'll love this simple idea. And you'll also love this idea if you've ever wanted to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with Elizabeth Gilbert about eating, praying, and loving. Or maybe you want Brené Brown to give you the real DL on vulnerability. Or maybe you want to ask Amanda Palmer how she got so many devoted fans and followers. Or maybe you just want to sit down and have a good belly laugh with Jessie Klein, Amy Schumer, Tina Fey, and Tig Notaro. Those are some of my favorites. Audible is the answer. You can sign up and get 2 free audiobooks right now. And most of the time, the author themselves will narrate the book, which is so cool to hear. Go to barenakedbravery.com/audible to get your free audiobooks today. I have a strange question.
Oh, I love strange questions.
What part of the body do you think grief comes out of?
Oh, that's an awesome question. In my work, I don't work within the box. So, I mean, I don't even know purposely. I don't know, which chakra means what.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm just talking about you. Like, what
just me. Oh, just me. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And maybe it's through multiple experiences of working with your clients, but like, what is your opinion of where you think grief comes from in the body?
From me. Wow. That's a great question. I'm going to hang out here. Just let me see what I get.
I'm going to take a sip of tea.
Okay. I would say definitely my heart. That's when I see an animal in pain, or when I think about the perils of wildlife or animal abuse when I'm working with my clients, my own grief. It's definitely, it's my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. My heart splits open. It literally splits.
The pain that we experience when we have to say goodbye
to
something, for me, it comes out of like the center of the belly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, I get the heart as well. Like that's also connected too. But whenever I have felt like I'm going back through some like really painful moments in my brain and thinking like, where was that grief coming from? Like what part of my body?
Yeah.
Definitely that like middle of like my abs.
Like, I know that. I get that one too.
It's like, so it's like when women get pregnant, their abs split open and go to the sides. Just crazy to me.
I know.
But it's very much like it feels like I'm giving birth to grief. Like goodbye,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, grief is definitely a force to be reckoned with. It's not a big bully. I mean, I think in our society, we see grief as a bad thing, something to be really afraid of, or even like you can catch it. What's the word I'm like?
Contagious.
Contagious. Yeah. That grief is contagious. People think death is contagious. I mean, in our society, we have such a weird view of death and grief. And death can be very positive. Grief can be very, very positive.
How have you seen that to be positive?
Death gives life.
Yep.
And when you're in the middle of grief, you don't want to hear that from me or anybody else. But as the process of grief morphs and changes, it never goes away, but it does change. Life starts to happen. And many new things, like with my experience, going through that raw grief, getting empowered by it, learning why it was in my life, learning why spiritually it was in my life, taking a hold of it, making a conscious effort to change it in the face of it, gave me an incredible life. I am so happy now that I don't need that kind of validation in my life from somebody else, which I don't know what it was, but that doesn't matter to me. But it just, I don't seek, I'm not lonely like that anymore.
Yeah.
So if somebody said to me that the death of that relationship would give me life, I would look at them and just say, you are absolutely nuts. Get the hell away from me. Because this is the way I feel. It's important to do that.
I know that with my hand, I was diagnosed with a tremor in my right hand.
Yeah.
It's not a cool idea.
Oh, not cool. Yeah.
So when I was going through some of the grief of reconciling what that meant for my life,
right,
I got a couple people who gave me that you'll push through it. It's only gonna make you stronger. And I was giving them both of the largest middle fingers
Good girl.
It felt awful to hear that.
Yes. It's awful. I mean, we say stupid things. We stay I think it's my first book. I talk about what stupid things people say. Like, say what? Are you kidding me? Like, you can get another dog. Your hand is going to get better. Push through it. It's only, it's only a stage. Or, like, do this. I know somebody that had this done, and so do this.
Yeah.
And we say that, as humans, we say those things because we don't know what else to say, because our culture, we haven't been trained for positive death. Like I was saying before, we've been trained to really fear it, or it's contagious. That if I say to you, I'm really sad, I have compassion for you, Emily, for what you might be going through. I'm here to listen to you. People in grief, we just need somebody to listen to us, not judge us, just hear our stories.
Right.
And that's the best thing that somebody could have said to you. And it's not that these people are bad people. It's just that we don't know. We're not educated.
Of course. And my response was always, thank you.
Yeah.
But inside, I just wanted to wring their neck.
Exactly. And that's totally normal.
and still to this day, you'll actually get a kick out of this. Still to this day. And now I play the cello a lot less just because my hand deems that so.
Yeah.
When I'm at a wedding or something and somebody asks me, oh, what do you do? I say, oh, I'm a musician. I'm a singer-songwriter. Because I know the second I let out the fact that, oh, and I also like cello is my most proficient instrument, then the floodgates open. It's like, oh, the cello. I love the cello. It's my favorite instrument and everything. Then the conversation's all about the cello. So I have to I have to hold that boundary for myself in conversation, because I know that it is a high likelihood that if I mention just the instrument alone, that's going to trigger all of that middle finger, it's
going to trigger your grief. It's going to trigger your grief.
Yeah.
And then when you don't have supportive people around you, that's when the chaos starts to happen. That's when, the mind starts to go, and who knows? If somebody says that the cello, I love the cello. And that triggers deep sadness.
Right.
Deep loss. And then maybe a day later you decide, you know what, I don't really want to go outside today. And then the next day you go, you know what, I'm going to eat that whole box of cookies because it looks good and I don't give a shit because I'm feeling like crap. And before you know it, you're like in the deep depression. You don't know why.
Right.
Well,
usually in those conversations, it's usually happening with a stranger. So that's not happening with somebody who knows me, of course.
Yeah.
But I've had to learn how to be okay with making the subject change really awkward.
Yeah. Right.
It's usually oh, the cello, I just love the cello. And I just nod my head.
Yeah, good.
And go
yeah.
How's your life? What are you doing?
That's perfect.
I don't even acknowledge that I agree with them, because I do.
Right.
If I agree with them, that's only an invitation to continue it even more.
Exactly. No, that's the perfect response. And that's what I teach my clients to do, is to just say thank you and walk away or change the subject. Mm-hmm. Our job is not to educate when we're in grief.
Oh, yeah. I'm writing that down.
Yes.
What is our job when we're grieving?
To grief, to go through the grief, take the journey, take the roller coaster ride, do the work. Don't stuff it down. Scream, cry, eat the box of cookies, throw your bicycle in the woods. Do those things.
Have you had some really quirky responses to grief that you've seen clients?
Oh, yeah.
Are you allowed to talk about them?
Well, I wouldn't mention any names, but let me tell you my crazy story. Okay?
Yes, please.
All right. My dog, Marley, was my soul dog. She's my soul sister. Those once in a lifetime dogs. She's beautiful Samoyed. Just incredible. We had an amazing bond. And when I was going through that story I told in the beginning, she would often look at me with what the hell are you doing? And, that kind of stuff. So anyway, she's 12 years old, extremely healthy dog. She started to get something weird going on with her left eye. and it was getting misdiagnosed. And I said, my dog has cancer. The vets were saying, no, she doesn't. I said, my dog has cancer. I want a CAT scan. So we had to go 2 hours away to a specialized hospital to get a CAT scan. And she had a fucking tumor that was so big, it was eating her brain.
Oh.
She did not even show it. It was eating her. She had no bone, basically. And you would never know it. She was still beautiful. She was such a beautiful dog. But it was
Samoas are so fluffy.
Oh, they're so fluffy.
They're like a big cotton ball.
They are. Oh. So when I got the news, I thought my world was going to end. Because here was a dog, an entity, a spirit that was so old, so deep, so evolved. And she was part of me. We did everything together. She was the one that got me out of the mess, got me out of my depression with that dance teacher. And I got the news. I didn't know what to do. I felt like, a brick hit me. And I remember I also like to cycle. And so I got out my bike, and she was given a week to live, but she actually lived 10 months because I really went into action with Chinese medicine and all that kind of stuff and energy healing. But one of the signs of grief is you start bargaining. You start bargaining with your deities or your God, whatever. So I was biking one day and I couldn't cry. I had a really hard time crying. And I thought something was wrong with me, but that's a sign of grief when you can't cry. I'm biking and I could feel it. I'm just getting like intense. And I was like, I don't care if I fall. I don't care if I die. I don't care. Let a car hit me. I live in the woods, so I can talk to myself like this. It's not weird.
It's not weird at all.
Don't do this in traffic. Okay. So I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't cry. I wanted to cry, but all I could do would be angry. So I got off my bicycle. I had like strength you wouldn't believe. I was on a dirt road. I took my bike and I said, and I was talking to my deities and I said, if you don't fucking keep her alive, I am just never going to, talk to you again. And this is absolutely insane. How could you possibly give this beautiful creature who is healthy nasal cancer? How could you do this to her? She's a living being and she helps the world. She was working with me, with my massage clients, healing them. And so I took my bicycle and I just threw it. And I stormed into the woods and I had a temper tantrum. And it's still to this, I still cry because I grieve her loss. Yeah. I did ruin my bike. But I became a giant in those woods, and I thanked the trees, and I said I apologized to them for hitting them so hard, but my deities were pissing me off. And I even said to them, you know what? I'm not going to bargain with you. I know that's a sign of grief, but I'm not bargaining with you. You just give me her life. So that's like my crazy story. But it's all normal. What I did was normal.
Oh, yeah.
And so I encourage people to do that. It becomes abnormal when you can't function. If I started to hurt myself with my bicycle or whatever, then that would not be, then you need professional help. But
yeah,
I never
one of my favorite, I guess, spiritual teachers and author not friend. I call him a friend because be good friends.
Right.
Rob Bell, he has talked a lot about grief and
Yes.
anger specifically.
Yes.
A lot of people say, don't entertain the anger because...
Oh, you have to.
Yeah. And his thing was, he's like, there's one time where somebody just really pissed him off and he just hated everything about this person. So he decided that he would, anytime he felt that way about this specific person, he would just run until he'd go on a run and run and run it off, and like the whole time just cursing and telling this guy everything he wants to do. And he said eventually, like over like months, those runs went from like 3-hour long runs to like 10-minute runs to
that's beautiful.
Just going to check the mailbox.
Right. That's beautiful. And that's how grief has life. Death has life. And anger is grief. And I think, again, in a lot of this with the new age philosophies is we're being told we can't feel angry. I mean, I think that's changing, but I've been in this, I've been around for a while. So I've seen, from the 60s to now how different genres.
I think it's simple. Well, I mean, before I knew that trick from Rob Bell.
Yeah, that's great.
I actually, when I was going through a season of intense therapy, there was one week where I was like, I just went on a run.
Yeah.
And in Seattle, there's this lake called Green Lake, and it's about 3 miles around. And I am not a runner.
Okay.
At all. But I went on a walk, and that became a run somehow. And then I was running 3 times around. So 9 miles without training at all.
Cool.
And crying, tears. And I actually got back to the car and my legs cramped up and I couldn't get out of the car when I got home. Because I'm not a runner. I don't know how to like stretch out, drink enough water, all this kind of stuff. Right. And so I don't run a lot anymore because I know how easy it is for me to get to a self-harm.
Yeah.
When I'm in that anger.
Right.
And how do you instruct your clients to prevent themselves from that self-harm, but entertain the anger and let it happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. Being a writer, I encourage my clients to write, and I have a couple of programs to do that, where I help them, coach them, guide them to start writing love letters and as they're expressing themselves to their pet. Okay, whether their pet is alive or has died. So you can express our pets are here to help us through any emotion without judgment, no matter what the pet is. They can handle, if we want to write an angry letter about them dying, they can handle that. They want us to do that.
Yeah.
So I encourage them to do that. If they don't like to write, then I have them speak it to make the intention. You have to do more than just think. You got to do grief, like I mentioned before. It takes work. It takes commitment. So doing something that works for that specific person. If it's not exercise, or if the exercise, like you said, could become abnormal, there are other avenues to do. There's other outlets, and there are all kinds. One of the best things is really to let it out. If you have to scream in a pillow,
And there, raising my hand.
Pillows are great. And finding a good support group. I mean, it's tough sometimes to find a good support group. But support groups are good. Working one-on-one with a coach or even a psychotherapist that's trained in pet loss, because it is different. I mean, grief is grief, death is death. There is that, but it takes a special person that can have the compassion for losing a pet, because there's a lot of myths out there. It's only, a cat. You can get another. You'll get over it. What do you mean? How could you possibly feel so much grief over a dog when there's so much suffering in the world?
Right.
So, there's so many myths, but there are ways to heal. And I think as the pet grief industry progresses, it's a new industry, that as we educate and help people to not feel alone, that there is a support, that it's not weird to cry. It's not weird to feel grief 10 years later. I grieve every single animal in my life since I've been a little kid, but but it's different. It changes. It has life. It has different life. There is support there. There is support for grief, and that people don't have to do it alone. And that the people that glaze over when you say, I lost my cat, I lost my dog, I lost my snake, my dog, my bird died, and they glaze over, that's the first cue to just get out. Walk away, because that's not going to be the person that's going to support the grief.
I mean, I know your books, because right now you've got 2 books for dogs.
Yep.
My dog has died. What do I do?
Right.
My dog is dying. What do I do?
Right.
And then you'll have my cat has died, and then my cat is dying.
Right.
And then you're doing horses too. Is that correct?
Right. Well, I'm going to give a break on the horses.
Okay.
And I'm going to probably write a book. I have 2 books in that I'm pushing the horses aside a little bit.
Oh.
One is on the afterlife. I have a lot of clients that find a lot of peace with their grief by connecting with their pet in the afterlife. And we can all do it. So I work with my clients to learn how to talk to their own animal. So I'm thinking either that book or my other book that is definitely before the horses or after the horses is the one for parents. How to help their children. And that one seems a little bit stronger than the afterlife. So that's probably the one I'm going to.
Our family, when we were living in France for like a semester, just a season, we brought our dog with us, and she was run over by a car in front of all of us.
Oh.
And it was one, like, I still have flashbacks.
Yeah.
Like when I'm in the shower or like random places. And I know that my parents, my sisters and I were too young to really fully grasp the severity of the situation. And also we were instructed to go straight to the car.
Right.
So I know that my parents had a much more intense experience trying to parent us through that.
Yeah. It's tough. It's very tough.
It's a necessary thing.
Because it has a lot to do with how the parents' view is on death.
Right.
And I kind of can compare it to becoming an end-of-life and pet loss grief coach. I had to get my views on death understood very well.
Yeah.
I have a different view. I've always have about death. So it wasn't that difficult. But I had to understand my grief a little bit more. So it's the same thing for parents, is really getting into the nitty-gritty of how you feel about death. What kind of adult do you want to create? Do you want to create a fearful adult, or do you want to create a healthy adult that has a healthy view on grief and death?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things I see as I interview parents is lying. Or that's probably the worst thing you could do for a child is, the dog went to sleep. Oh my God. No, the dog did not go to sleep. That would put, for a kid that loves dogs and that love their dog, I'm afraid to go to sleep, Mom, because I don't want to die.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I know that you've got an awesome little kit on your website for pet loss support.
Yes.
And that is for free.
Yes.
And it's a PDF and an MP3.
Yeah.
And it's a meditation, like you walk you through a little meditation.
Yeah.
You can get it at centerforpetlossgrief.com. And I will put that link in the show notes and all Wendy's other awesome links and her Facebook group for your pet memorials and everything else. So I am just so grateful that you got to do this today with me.
Thank you, Emily. I had fun.
Oh, I did too. As strange as that is, I had fun talking about grief with you.
I know. I know.
What a stellar conversation. Thank you, Wendy, for joining us again. I know that I am always saying that I'm grateful to our guests for joining us, but it's so true. There's so many things that you could be doing with your day, and I'm really grateful that our guests join us. And I'm also really grateful that you are listening. And so we want to give you takeaways. And today's takeaway for this episode is the Healing Your Pet Loss Support Kit, which is a PDF and an MP3. And the link to that is available in our show notes, which you can get by just going to barenakedbravery.com. And you can find myself and Wendy Van Pol on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. And there are links to all of that stuff and Wendy's book as well, many books on our show notes. So go ahead and just visit barenakedbravery.com for that. I'd like to share with you one of my favorite reviews that we've gotten over the last couple weeks on iTunes. Caitlin from the US says, "Do you know the feeling? The tingle that spreads over your skin as you resonate deeply with the stories of others? The urge to make a pot of tea, pour a glass of wine, and begin creating from the space of your own being? That is what I felt after listening to the first podcast of Bare Naked Bravery." Yeah, inside Emily is just screaming, yes! She continues, "I felt lighter and deeper even after a few words from this host. I let the laughter and tears flow throughout the talk and was left wanting more. Thanks, Emily Ann, for this podcast. I can't wait to tune in to more." I just love that. I love it, love it, love it. That kind of feeling of goosebumps with pouring a pot of tea, that is exactly what we set out to make from this show. And if you resonate with that and you want to leave your own stamp of approval, go ahead and visit iTunes store and look for Bare Naked Bravery, and you can just leave a rating and review there, and we would just love to hear all about it. You can also leave a question in your review for me to answer, or for a guest to answer too. I'd love to start doing that. As always, if you are loving the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. If you want to find out more about the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, please visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. And we are so looking forward to being with you next week. There are so many cool things in store. So until then, I have one message for you. It's the same message as always, but it still applies. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.